WFYI Podcasts, brought to you by Bloomington, home to the Indiana Hoosiers and over 200,000 acres of fall foliage in the Hoosier National Forest. Indulge in seasonal flavors at the Elm, experience breathtaking views atop 4 fire towers, or catch a Big Ten football game at Memorial Stadium. More, including how to plan your fall getaway, at visitbloomington.com.
I'm Kyle Long, and you're listening to Cultural Manifesto. Up next, I'll speak with Felix Cavaliere of the Rascals. Felix co-founded the Rascals in 1965 in Garfield, New Jersey. The band was originally known as the Young Rascals. The Rascals arrived at the height of rock and roll's British invasion era, when English bands like the Beatles and Dave Clark 5 were dominating the rock and roll market. But the Rascals quickly found their place in the American music scene. The band's second single, a cover of the R&B song Good Lovin', became a #1 hit on the Billboard chart.
1, 2, 3, good love, good love, good love, good love.
And as Felix Cavaliere's skills as a songwriter developed, the band would return to the Billboard charts again and again with original compositions, including Groovin', Beautiful Morning, People Gotta Be Free, How Can I Be Sure, and more.
How can I be sure in a world that's constantly changing? How can I be sure where I stand with you? Whenever I'm away from you.
Today, the Rascals are considered one of the defining American rock bands of the 1960s. They were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1997, and Felix Cavaliere was inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame in 2009. Let's join our conversation as we discuss the band's early years. Felix, the Rascals will be performing here in Indiana at the Brown County Music Center on September 28th. I'm a huge fan of the band, so thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
If you don't mind, I want to go back to the beginning of the Rascals. The band was formed in 1965, the height of the British invasion. British groups like the Beatles, Stones, Zombies, Animals, and so many others were dominating rock music at that time. Was it difficult for American rock bands to break out at that time? And if so, what did you do to get noticed?
A lot of things. I mean, that's a long question because, well, basically, I really think that, yeah, of course it was difficult. It was only difficult because of the quality of the music that was coming out of England at that time. I mean, you know, everybody there was pretty darn good, you know. So, but I feel that there was a kind of a thirst for an American band or bands to kind of step up, you know. So when we stepped up and the Byrds stepped up and a Lovin' Spoonful stepped up, I think we were welcomed as a kind of like we could do that too.
In addition to being a vocalist and songwriter for the Rascals, you were also the band's organist, of course. At that time in straight-ahead rock music, the organ was not a typical instrument to use. Of course, it had a huge role in R&B music with artists like Bill Doggett and even James Brown and Ray Charles used the organ in their music. What inspired you to play the organ and bring it into the band in such a prominent way?
Well, if I go back to, you know, a few years before I started the band, I happened to go to this club in New Rochelle, New York, and it was a black club, and there was an organ trio there. And what I saw was a drummer, a sax player, and an organist. The organ player was playing bass with his feet. He was playing rhythm with his left hand. He was playing lead with his right hand, and he was singing. And it just totally captivated me. I said, "Oh my God, this is a whole orchestra. This is a whole band, and that one instrument." prior to that, I was playing piano. I was a classical piano player, pianist, as they say. And I said, man, I've got to learn this thing, because it was really an epiphany for me because of the fact that he was encompassing so many different parts of a band just with one instrument, and himself, of course. So that's how it started. So when I started the band, when I started meeting the guys, I just didn't meet a bass player. So I played the bass on the Hammond.
Any chance you remember the name of that organist in New Rochelle you saw?
Yes, that was called the Mighty Cravers was the name of the band.
Oh, do you know what it means to be emulsified now? Yeah. I want to tell you this story about being emulsified. Yeah. It goes something like this. Hey, my baby's a real gold chick. Emulsified. When she calls me, I'm run to her quick. Emulsified. When my baby holds me tight, don't you know I get emulsified?
It just, I said, wow, look at that. See, I'd never really heard anybody do that. I mean, it was called an organ trio, you know, and they're quite prevalent in the clubs, but I was too young to go to clubs. I don't even know how I got in there.
I'm calling you from Indianapolis, where I live, and Wes Montgomery is one of our music heroes here, and he's credited with helping to popularize that trio sound. His organist was a guy named Mel Ryan, and they blew up on Riverside Records in the late 50s. So yeah, I love that sound. Tell me about the influence of jazz on your work. The later Rascals albums featured jazz players like Ron Carter and Fathead Newman, and you were featuring jazz instrumentals on the records too. Was jazz a big influence on your musical development?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I grew up, in an era where we had the Newport Jazz Festival, in Rhode Island. And a lot of my, my companions, my friends, we used to go up to that jazz festival. So jazz was all around us at that time. And then, when we became, a group on Atlantic Records, we were the first white band that Atlantic Records ever signed on their red and black label. That was a jazz label. It was an R&B label. So the halls were filled with these jazz musicians. And I really took the opportunity to utilize them. And of course, we had this wonderful man helping us out, Arif Mardin, and he was really hip to all these guys. So we utilized as many as we could.
Don't you hear the music, baby? Don't it feel good, baby? Let it get to you, baby. Try and let go. You don't have to worry about a thing. Just come on up. Come on up. Just come on up, baby. And have a good time.
You mentioned signing to Atlantic. How exciting was that for you as a young man? I mean, this is the label that helped popularize rock and roll and rhythm and blues, and John Coltrane and all these icons of jazz had recorded classic albums for the label. Freddie Hubbard from here in Indianapolis recorded for the label. Yeah, how exciting was that for you?
Well, first of all, Atlantic Records was the only record label that it would allow us to produce ourselves. From the get-go, I wanted to produce the band internally because, I just didn't want someone else to take the idea of sound that I had and transform it to their idea of sound. I wanted to keep it, the Rascals. I wanted to keep it whatever it was that you were listening to. So Atlantic was the only label that would allow that to happen.
And Felix, I want to ask about your evolution as a songwriter. You've written multiple number one hits, and in 2009, you were inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame. When the Rascals released their first album in 1966, the record only featured one original. The rest of the album was made up of covers. But by 1968, you were writing entire albums for the group, and your songs were having a huge impact on popular music. That seems like a quick evolution, on paper when you look at the numbers. But had you been writing songs all along? Tell me about your evolution as a writer.
Well, yes, basically I was writing songs all along, but you see that the situation was, as a group that was performing in nightclubs, the people who owned the nightclubs did not want any original songs at that time. They said, you either play what they call top 40 or we're not going to hire you. So all of our sets, everything that we did, had to be pre-recorded by someone else. And I would have to go out of my way to prove, like, for example, when I found Good Lovin' and I found Mustang Sally, they were not hits by the artist who put them out originally. But I had to go and buy the 45 record and prove to the proprietors of the restaurants and the nightclubs, this is not my song. This is a song that we're covering. That was demanded by the places we were working. Now, of course, at the same time, we got these wonderful groups coming out of England. And, of course, Bob Dylan and, as I say, Love and Spoonful. Now everybody's starting to write their own music. That was a brand new phenomenon to our industry. Prior to that, the singers and the producers went to publishing houses. And they found songwriters there, and they found songs there. So that was a whole new breakthrough. So obviously, I really wanted to be part of that. So I was able to enjoy, after Good Lovin' hit so big, I was able to kind of say, well, okay, now we're going to do my songs, our songs.
It's a beautiful morning.
And Felix, I want to ask about one of your signature songs, People Got to Be Free, which was released in 1968. The song was released at a time when the country was in turmoil, the Vietnam War, civil rights movement, assassinations of RFK and MLK. At this point in the Rascals' career, the group was not known for singing protest music or topical songs. Tell us about the history of this song and what inspired you to write People Gotta Be Free.
Well, as people are growing up, we were growing up, we had some success, and the difference is that there was also a lot happening, as you say. There was a lot, much like now. There was a lot of turmoil, in the country and in the world, and a lot of us really felt like, well, hey, we've got a voice. Maybe we should say something and just kind of let people know what we think, because there's a lot of people listening to us. And on the other hand, I was working at that time for Robert Kennedy's campaign. He was running for president. And I was seeing this young lady who was actually present at the horrible night when he got assassinated. She was actually there, out in Los Angeles. Well, when you get involved in someone's campaign, whether it, doesn't matter who it is, you really get overwhelmed with like the kind of desire to elect this person, male or female. So when that happened, it just really threw me. It catapulted me into a real kind of place of, I got to say something, man. Got to write something. Got to feel something here so that people know what I feel, what we feel. Maybe I'm speaking for myself. Maybe I'm speaking for the group. Maybe I'm speaking for a generation. I don't know. But it was compelling enough for me to write a song. And I happened to be on vacation at that time. And I literally heard this horrible event on a shortwave radio. And it just freaked me out, man. As anybody would when there's a horrible situation like that. So that's how that song came about.
You just alluded to the parallels today, and I wanted to ask you about that. Your current tour is titled the People Gotta Be Free Tour. For you, what does this song say about the moment we're living through today in America, where we do see we've seen a lot of turmoil and unrest over the last few years? Yeah.
Well, basically, it's so interesting that song was written all those years ago, and we still haven't kind of like got to the place where people are respecting one another to, obey the so-called golden rule, which is, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So simple, but it still hasn't happened. As a matter of fact, now, I also wrote a song at that time called "A Ray of Hope." Mm-hmm. So when I do that song live, I kind of say like, I'll paraphrase it. I remember when you could write a song without getting anyone angry. Mm. I do that a little bit more forcefully on stage, but that's ridiculous. People get angry when you put an opinion out. The word protest, happened because of the fact that, the Vietnamese War and all that, but it wasn't really protest. It was just kind of statements that you're making to just let people know how you feel, which I think is very important.
All the world over so easy to see. People everywhere just wanna be free. Listen, please, listen, that's the way it should be. Peace in the valley, people got to be free. You should see what a lovely, lovely world is to be. Everyone learn to live together.
And Felix, from what I understand, you weren't just singing about civil rights, you were working behind the scenes to make sure the Rascals were helping to foster a more equitable culture in the music business. And one way that you did that was through committing to perform on integrated concert bills. You brought Black performers and groups onto the Rascals' concerts and tours. I mean, the Civil Rights Act was passed into law in 1964, but segregation was still a reality for Black people in many parts of the country in the late 60s. What inspired you to be so passionate about this issue? And did this create problems for the Rascals when you were out on tour in, some of these smaller spots on the map?
Well, I'll answer the second part first. Yes, it did create problems. Kind of naively, I never thought it would cause that much problem with a lot of people, but it was ridiculous. Basically, there's two parts to the first question. First of all, I grew up in a town. I just recently wrote a book called Memoir of a Rascal, From Pelham to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Mm-hmm. Small town. And when we got there, my family and I, we were one of the first Italian families in the town. And the way my mom was treated by the town got me into a place that I never really recovered from. In other words, like I saw that prejudice, I saw that kind of like segregation, early in life. And it really made me angry because, my mom was a very educated woman. She was actually way ahead of her time. She was a head of a pharmacy in a major New York hospital, in the 40s, which, that didn't happen. But the way she was treated and the way we were treated, like, for example, they had a country club, and the country club did not allow Jews, did not allow Italians, did not allow Spanish. I mean, and that started me off to kind of be a little bit rebellious towards whatever that was, that was causing that problem. So as I grew up and I became, I'd say even more rebellious, so to speak, we were doing a concert one time, and there was this group, I think it was called the Young Holt Trio. And it was a Black group, but it was really not a Black music group. They were more like a pop group. Their skin happened to be Black. Big deal. So they came back and they said to us, "Man, thank you so much for having us on the bill. We really like working for some of the white audiences. We don't get a chance." And I said, "Man, that's really interesting. We really like playing for the Black audiences, but we don't get a chance." So I said, "Wow, why don't we try to make this happen?" we had a little bit of power at that time. So I said, hey, okay, we're not going to perform unless we get the opportunity, to have an R&B act in front of us, because we wanted to make the people who were buying our records feel welcome. Well, as you said in part two, yeah, it did cause a lot of problems.
I wanted to ask about the reach of the Rascals' music. You covered a lot of stylistic ground with the group. I'm a huge fan of soul and R&B music, and the Rascals had a lot of crossover success on the R&B charts. You mentioned you were one of the first, if not the first, white band signed on Atlantic Records. Rolling Stone magazine in 1970 published an article about the Rascals called The Blackest White Group of All. I don't know if you remember that. But tell me about the reach of this music. You were reaching black music fans, and I'm sure that was meaningful for you, as you were so influenced by black R&B performers and singers growing up.
Yeah, it was very meaningful. As a matter of fact, that was the difference between like a number 1 record and a number 5 record or a number 0 record. The music at that time, was a lot more integrated, I feel, than it is now. Because, the radio stations would play from Motown, they'd play from Stax, they'd play from, pop, and they would mingle it. I mean, you even had some like, you had Johnny Cash on the radio. You had, these people that, you would never hear that today because it's so genre oriented. It's so demographic oriented, but it was a wild mix of good music. So basically, as I say, to become part of that was pretty exciting, and Atlantic being, in the R&B jazz world, they had a lot of outlets to that, how should I put it, radio stations, et cetera, audience. So it was really a big deal for us. And it was something, I find it really interesting because, I live in Nashville right now. I've been here for quite a while. Yet when I speak, nobody thinks I came from Nashville, And so I really think the music is the same thing, even though we were doing songs, there was a kind of like a personality put on it that identified more with the R&B world than with the pop world. So it was not anything you did intentionally. That was just a natural effect.
Felix, as I mentioned, the Rascals will be performing at the Brown County Music Center on September 28th. You've played a lot of legendary gigs with the Rascals. And before I ask you about your upcoming concert here in Indiana, I want to get your thoughts on one of those legendary shows you played. In the summer of 1967, the Rascals headlined a concert at Central Park in New York City. And the Jimi Hendrix Experience was your opening band, right? What memories do you have of that? I mean, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it was pretty incredible evening too. See, we knew Jimmy from before he became the Jimi Hendrix Experience. He was a guitar player for some groups that would come to New York, like the Isley Brothers, and so we got to know him, and kind of like realize what a talent he was way before he went to England and decided he was going to be a headliner. Because he was a session guy. He was basically a guy in a band who would play behind the prominent members, whoever they may be. Well, when he came from England, I looked at him and I said, Jim, what's going on, man? He says, I'm going to show you what's going on, man. And it was a whole different personality. Instead of being a shy guy who could play his tail off, he was a very flamboyant guy who could play his tail off. But Jim was one of the nicest men I've ever met. I mean, he was a real sweet man. So a lot of people don't understand that, his fiery image on stage he was really a lot sweeter and softer and nicer than people will ever imagine. But that was quite a night. That was his first American appearance as the Jimi Hendrix Experience.
Wow, that's incredible. Tell us about your upcoming performance here in Indiana and the musicians you're touring with now.
Well, basically, living in Nashville, I've got a really great choice of people that I can work with. And I've had this band together for quite a while. They're local people here, and then I've got a few from New York and New Jersey coming up. And, basically, they kind of grew up with the music, and I think they play it really well. The one thing I like is that everybody really enjoys playing, and that comes across to the audience. We really have a good time. So we hope that everybody that comes out will feel that not only are we going to have a good time, but you're going to have a good time.
Yeah, I'm excited to see the band here in Indiana on September 28th. Thank you so much for taking time to talk with me today and for the great conversation. It was an honor to have you on the program. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Colin. I look forward to saying hello to you. So welcome to our show, and we're looking forward to Indiana.
On a Sunday afternoon, really couldn't get away too soon.
WFYI Podcasts, brought to you by Bloomington, home to the Indiana Hoosiers and over 200,000 acres of fall foliage in the Hoosier National Forest. Indulge in seasonal flavors at the Elm, experience breathtaking views atop 4 fire towers, or catch a Big Ten football game at Memorial Stadium. More, including how to plan your fall getaway, at visitbloomington.com.